Over the course of 31, almost 32 years now together as a married couple, how often would you think in your world wanting to be wanted comes up?
Gosh, a lot, especially, I mean, even take the marriage world outside of it.
Yeah, it's almost a universal thing in some ways, you
Yes.
think?
Yeah, I think it's universal.
Well, it's good that people are tuning in today because that's the topic we're going to jump into is this whole concept. So if you think of Sexy Marriage Radio, welcome to Sexy Marriage Radio, by the way. We're having straightforward, honest conversations to try to help frame how to have better connection, more depth of connection, more honesty, more vulnerability. And then in today's world, we're going to be talking more about continuing the conversation on desire, the differences, but more specifically on the idea of wanting. Okay, that's where we're heading, just as a quick tease. And so if you're new to the show, welcome. We want to know what's going on with you. You can let us know by calling us at 214-702-9565 or at feedback@sexymarriageradio.com. And those emails that come in help point the direction of where we go a lot of times, because that's where the theme has been the last several weeks with a couple of call-in shows, an episode with Jay Parker on her new book, The Higher Desire Wife. And we're going to kind of take our take to it of let's look at it through the lens of wanting. And so that's where we're heading today in the regular version. And then the extended content, we're going to go into what I believe is oftentimes even more difficult than this dilemma of wanting to be wanted. And that is wanting to want.
Okay, I have to sit and think about that for a second. So that sounds more like I'm apathetic if I'm not someone that wants something. We're just going to
maybe
dive
that's a
into
good
it
way
more.
to think about it from a general stage of how a lot of times aspects of our lives and our relationships, we are fairly apathetic about them. Little tease for all that's coming up.
Yeah,
I'm
going to have a lot of questions.
So let's set the stage for today's show, because we've had two call-in segments that bookended the episode with Jay Parker. And they've basically been on the theme of the higher desire wife. And then right before that was from the archives with Jennifer Finlayson Fife on the lower desire wife. And so we've been really talking about a theme of desire, and particularly the discrepancies and differences that we have, because we believe here at Sexy Marriage Radio, there's a higher desire and there's a lower desire on everything. And so one of you will be on one end of that spectrum and your spouse will be on the other. And they're not right or wrong. They're just points on a continuum. And it really helps frame the dilemma that each of us face within this.
Right. And again, we're not saying no desire. We're just saying
higher or lower.
And lower. We're just different.
Right.
Different
and
levels.
So another way to look at this, because we kind of started trying to talk through what were each of the ladies that called in, what were their specific dilemmas that they're facing. Because oftentimes what we tend to do in marriage is we focus so much on the spouse and their role in my dilemma. And so the goal then becomes, how do I put this better on the shoulders of where I actually have responsibility, which is myself, rather
responsibility
than
or any control.
Right. Well, the same. Absolutely. Because rather than how do I get my spouse to do X, Y, Z, or match my level or interest or novelty or whatever.
Which you have zero control over.
Exactly. And maybe we have a modicum of influence over it, but maybe not even that much when it comes to influence too, because I think there's this fundamental thing that happens in us humans that I capture a lot of clients this way when I'm working with couples. You can put them in this category of, I love you, but don't tell me what to do. And a lot of times when we try to influence a spouse, it comes across as telling them what to do. And I think there's something in us that rebels to that. Even if I know it's good for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And good for our relationship, there's still a part of me that's like, I'm not doing that just because you told me you want that.
I mean, that's clear just from the expressions of the wet paint. You know, every time you put wet paint on a bench and someone wants to touch it.
Exactly. So what we're trying to do today is look at it through this lens of if we talk about wanting to be wanted, that's kind of how we started the episode real quick. Of it is a fundamental thing of us humans. We want attention, we want affection, we want acknowledgement, we want presence to be felt, because it's something in us that's an aspect of our relationship dynamic. Because I believe we're always in relationship. That's the way my lens of the world is. We are always in relationship.
Yeah, well, we were created for that, right? Adam wanted something else. Something was missing.
Right. He was alone. And so here you go. Here comes Eve, and that sets the stage. And so one of my old colleagues actually phrased it as we are created in togetherness, born into separateness, constantly still trying to fill togetherness. And that kind of captures it, because it takes two people to create you, as far as a sperm and an egg. And then you're born, all of a sudden you become detached from mom. And now you're completely separate, trying to figure out the world. But there's a soothing that comes with that reattachment of connection, affection, love, etc.
Yeah.
And we just continue that process all the way through. And that's where it plays out in this. I want to be close to somebody until I feel like I'm losing myself. And then I want myself, but then I'll feel like I'm losing my relationship. And that's the dilemmas we go back and forth between all the time, just in a nutshell. So when you look at trying to advocate for our desires of, hey, I want you to want me, fun song, by the way.
Yes.
That was way back in the day.
I need you to need me. I'd love you to love me.
That's an interesting dynamic too, of adding in the concept of need to this, because Dr. Schnarch would phrase this as, we want to be wanted, but we settle for being needed. And that's different.
It is.
Being needed is a completely different characteristic in how it plays out and how it does not satisfy wanting to be wanted.
Okay. So that's a deeper piece, right? Because the need piece is more about being able to sustain, right? It's I need you to support me so I can eat, have a roof over my head, things like that.
That's usually then attached to what somebody else provides, not the somebody else.
Yeah.
That's sometimes the big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could have that all day long, but have zero desire or want.
Sure. I'll hear this between couples a lot of times where, stereotypically speaking, it can get caught in this dynamic of she feels like all she is needed for is her body in their marriage. He feels like all he is needed for is his bank account in the marriage. And that's, I'm being completely stereotypical there with that statement.
And yeah, that can flip anywhere.
Absolutely, it can. But it's recognizing when I'm needing something, it's not satisfying what's being wanted, which is ourselves. And so when you look at how do I balance this dynamic of I want to be wanted, so what do I need to do? The theme we kind of have gone through is what we've talked about on Sex and Marriage Radio for years is, how do I create something that I deem is worth wanting?
Yeah. And what does that picture look like, really? You know, if someone's listening for the first time, something worth wanting is what? It could be a different picture to a number of different people. It seems to me like it's someone who has a fullness for life.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm not needy. We talk about, I need you, I want you. I'm not needy. My life and my sustenance is not dependent on you, but I look at the fullness, right? The humor, the joy, the adventure of life. Those are all the things, some of the aspects that I think play into the want side.
Yeah. And well, and then it's just look at it. Let's kind of continue the dialogue from the episodes of when you frame a dilemma that we're in, that's kind of on a global level. And let's use it in the context of sex, that the higher desire spouse for sex, and they need to understand their dilemma, their aspect of the dilemma, and then figure out, how do I avoid blame? That's kind of what we've been talking about. Because a lot of times what we'll do is, if I'm wanting something sexually more than you, it's very, very easy for me to not understand my role in the dilemma and what my point, what I'm actually facing, and then just focus it on you and just blame you because you don't want to do this, or you're not interested in this, or this never happens this way, or you don't ever XYZ. right?
Okay.
And so a lot of times what's missed is we don't recognize that the way I'm not acknowledging my aspect of the dilemma isn't creating something worth wanting, actually. Because if I'm very, very particular and blamey about it, that's not endearing. That's just attacking. And that's usually always met with defensiveness or explanations or justifications. And that's the round and round arguments that you can have in marriage. Well, you only blah, 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 blah. But yeah, but you never blah, blah. And now we're just off to the races, right?
Yeah. I think when you get, you're starting off with the sexual aspect of it.
Which I'm trying to keep it there just to keep the theme going, because otherwise we're going to get too broad.
I don't know how you can do this without going broad, though.
Okay.
Because it all fits in together.
Absolutely. I want to use this as the lens of how you do sex is how you do life.
How you do life is how you do sex.
And just to look at it as the particular ways in which we are wanting to be wanted sexually plays out absolutely in the ways I live life too, and want to be wanted just as a person. That I want to be noticed. I want to be acknowledged. I want to be seen. I want to be appreciated.
Well, I think of it this way in the aspect of going broadly with this. The people listening to this podcast are the people that more than likely typically are the higher desire. Mm-hmm. Or they're out there trying to do something to deal with things going on within their sex life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If they're listening and their spouse is not, my gut is the spouse is the one that's got higher desire in other aspects of life.
Sure.
Right? They want their spouse to want other things more.
Right. I want the emotional connectivity more.
I want you to want to care about the finances more. I want you to want to join me on this adventure more. I want you to want to do all these other things more. And so I think it's worth everybody understanding how that dynamic fits out. If you're wanting your spouse to play a different role within the sexual relationship, you got to open your eyes and see they're probably wanting something else as well.
Yeah, because it is happening on both sides of the equation in different ways. That's a universal truth I believe in.
Yeah.
So if you look at it then, because here's one of the dilemmas that happens that I think a lot of times higher desires, we don't recognize that the way I'm going about it and then what I accept or don't accept is also teaching and revealing my character and my integrity. Because here's the one I often hear about is a higher desire spouse for sex, wanting a particular kind of connective sex, but yet their spouse just does the perfunctory, go through the motions, get the job done sex, which the higher desire spouse gladly laps up like a starving dog, if you will, right? They'll just accept it all the time. Well, what then you're doing is showing, don't listen to what I say, because I'll take whatever little bit you'll give.
So what are they supposed to do then? Okay, so if I want to be wanted, I don't feel like I'm being wanted. What's my next move?
That is as particular as the individual and the uniqueness of the situation. But the first step is acknowledging, am I a person that just, well, at least it's still sex, I'll take it. Because what I'm teaching then, and this is what I think a lot of times we don't acknowledge, what I'm actually teaching and how I react, how I act. Because if this is something I'm saying is important to me, but yet I do things that are counter to show that, I'm not being something that needs to be dealt with very well. And that's part of this dilemma of that. Why should, this is one of the phrases that I read from Schnarch, why should your spouse give you their best when they know that you're willing to settle for so much less?
Well, and do I want to be wanted in a way that, maybe I need to reevaluate what I'm wanting.
And that's part of what starts to come through as far as the clarification of understanding the dilemma more. Okay, what is this really about? Because a lot of times what I'm going after when I'm talking about I want to be wanted, I don't have a good, clear picture of how is it coming from goodness and fullness, or is it really more out of an emptiness and a neediness?
Right. If I'm wanting something that just isn't even good, right?
But I think it is because that's the way I have evolved and conditioned myself on how I'm approaching life.
Yeah, we've all got to look at what it is. Am I being taken over by something worldly? I mean, there's number one, the God first in the foremost of my mind. Am I putting something else before that relationship that's then tainting my spousal relationship? Right? I got to look at where I'm centered first. And a lot of that, I think we all can tend to get skewed on what it is we want and why we want it and how important we think that want is. And when you center yourself, you realize, wow, I really got off the path there. I was really going after something that, why was that a big deal? Why was that so important
I had
to
no
me?
idea what I was really after there.
Yeah.
I thought I did, but then because this also is found when I actually feel like I get it and it's short lived and it's fleeting. That's a good marker of, okay, how good was it that I was really wanting? Because some of that's just going to be the reality of life on human terms.
Yeah.
Is things won't be as satisfactory as we think they will be in the one-offs, if you will. Like I achieved something, I think I have arrived, and then no, that feeling is gone. And that's where I have to look at this as a whole. I can't let just my feelings drive this thing, because our feelings aren't accurate a lot of times. Just like sometimes our thought processes aren't accurate. I skew things, I evolve, I adjust, I manipulate. And then I get it. And my spouse is going, really? You don't even see yourself here, do you?
How many times do we not do that though, right? We can't see the forest for the trees, right? Because I'm just so set on whatever this thing is that I want. Can't see how it's affecting everything else.
And so this is where to kind of start to land this a little bit. So we could go a long, long time about this, because there's all kinds of aspects that can be revealed in us. And that's where I would want to start with the actual tangible, what do you do with this, is you start asking yourself better questions about, okay, what is my want, whatever it is, actually revealing in me? What's fueling this thing? Because a lot of times if we keep it in the sexual arena, what I have found is, and this has been my journey, is I have sexualized things that are not sexual. And so I'm using the sexual aspect to soothe something, to satisfy something, to cure something that it's not, there's no way it could, because it's boredom or it's anxiety or it's a little bit of depressedness or it's uncertainty. And so therefore, hey, if I can have sex with you, that'll prop me up. I'll feel better about myself. And that's the really short-lived encounters.
And that does not sound enticing at all as a spouse.
No.
Right? I mean, that just doesn't sound like sex worth wanting.
Particularly when it's covert, when I'm unaware of it or I'm aware of it, but not bringing it forward. Because we've been advocates in the past on the show of, are there times when I am uncertain and I would feel better if I had a connected encounter with you, sexually or conversationally? Either way, yes, that's part of what a relationship can do. They can bring us up, but I need to be aware of that more going into it, because then I can lead with it. Because then it's not the whole, hey, I'm really wanting to connect with you. It's, hey, the time with you, I'm really kind of feeling down and I'd really love to spend some time with you to connect. That's a little different phraseology of like, this is what's going on with me more. Rather than I try to act like that's not happening and you're reading right through it. When I'm paying attention, I know what you're really after, and I know why. Man, I've had clients that refer to this as the meter has been running.
Okay, explain
and so that means I need to put something in the meter to get you in a better mood.
Oh, because it's been a while and I can...
Or life has been ramping up, jobs been ramping up, and the way they calm themselves down is they want a sexual experience. But they frame it as, no, this is from the life-giving compartments of me. This is the part that I'm trying to just really pour into you. It's not about me. And yes, it is. And there's a blind spot to not even aware of it. And I think one of the things I can do of when I can recognize my side of the dilemma, I own that better. I see how I go about life better in what I do to try to lick my emotional wounds or soothe my hurts or fears. And I bring those forward because it's not like I always need to present a good package of a completely put together, buttoned up person.
So if you're doing that self-evaluation, does that make you want to be wanted less? Or does it just put the desire for that more in perspective? So it's not just this heightened, I'm up here on a mountain, I'm down in a valley. I'm up here on a mountain, I'm down in a valley.
No, I think it creates, you tell me on just the way I'm thinking of this in my head. I think it creates, it doesn't necessarily make the wanting to be wanted less. It makes the wanting that I'm wanting more accurate. It's more of me being seen. So therefore, there's less of this, she's just going through the motions, she's just doing, and there's more of a presence here because I'm presenting more of who I am.
Well, I'm debating it all in my head because it's a complicated situation. But I think when I have less reliance on that human and being wanted by them and more reliance on I'm spending time more spiritually, right? With God, I don't have such a reliance on a human being. I think my biggest realization is every human being's going to disappoint, right? They're never going to feel whatever want it is I may personally have. And if I've got this expectation of a human being feeling that, I'm always going to be disappointed and I'm never going to have a want, quote unquote, filled.
Well, that's the idea of being a part of something bigger than myself, which is the spiritual nature, the relationship with God, the kingdom mindset. All of that is a calling to something higher than ourselves.
Yeah.
Whereas when we get in the tyranny of the lowest common denominator, a lot of times the wanting to be wanted, it's too small.
Yeah.
But when I create something bigger, like you're describing here, that creates a better dynamic where I do clean up the pressure. So it doesn't have to be 100% satisfactory for that want. It's just a component of a relationship dynamic that we all want.
Yeah, I think that point of cleaning up the pressure, lightening the pressure on the person that I'm there with, and that gives them a more lightheartedness. It's not it's not like a burden, right? They can join you in whatever adventure you're on, whether that adventure is just life in general or, something specific.
Yeah, because to think about, a lot of times wanting to be wanted leans more towards the other validation.
Right.
And that's when it becomes a problem. Big time.
Yeah.
Is I need my desire of my frame of how I feel about myself is dependent on how I perceive you feel about me. That's other validation.
Yeah.
And that becomes very, very problematic. But it is an aspect of every relationship still, because we all take cues from people around us. And so being aware of that and then moving it into the aspect of, okay, how do I get this more self-validated, at least so there's a better harmony? So I'm more aware of, I'm wanting this from you, and I see it more. I see it as that's what I'm really wanting, but I can also bring more of me to it to balance that out or harmonize it more, which just cleans it up, because it's just a dynamic I think that's always present in a marriage. We don't ever get completely self-validated. We could get completely other validated. I've worked with people that are really close to that's their world. Those are oftentimes extreme people pleasers.
Ouch.
But it's recognizing the importance of bringing myself forward more is what creates the greater likelihood of I can be wanted, because what I'm presenting is something I believe that is worth wanting. And that's the dilemma, because it may or may not work, but it doesn't mean I don't still bring that forward to see each and every day. And then we'll pivot here in just a second to the extended content and shift it into the want to want dynamic. So get your questions ready, babe.
Yes, they're in my hip pocket.